The delicate floral teacups poised on their saucers seemed to tremble with the unspoken fury that vibrated between us, a stark contrast to the saccharine sweet scent of peach blossoms and forced smiles. I gripped the armrest of my chair, my knuckles white, the soft velvet a poor anchor against the storm raging inside me. Across the room, bathed in the soft glow of fairy lights, stood Clara, my own sister, her laughter tinkling like wind chimes, but to me each note was a hammer blow. She had just finished her little performance, a theatrical sigh about my simple life, delivered with a saccharine smile to a room full of eager faces, women who now giggled knowingly. "Bless her heart," Clara had purred, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Evelyn, she could never truly understand love. Not without children, you know." The words, meant to be a harmless jest at her bridal shower, landed like a brutal punch to my gut. It was a public dismissal of my entire existence, a calculated humiliation wrapped in a pretty bow. The polite chuckles that rippled through the room felt like 1,000 tiny needles pricking at my skin, each one a testament to their belief in her carefully crafted narrative. They saw the joke, the pathetic, childless aunt, the woman who couldn't possibly comprehend the grand tapestry of love stories. A hot, stinging wave of humiliation washed over me, but beneath it, a deeper, more dangerous emotion began to simmer. This wasn't just about a throwaway line, it was the culmination of years of quiet neglect, of her subtle digs and blatant manipulations. It was the public declaration of a betrayal story that had been unfolding in the shadows for far too long. Every time I had swallowed my pride for the sake of family peace, every moment I had put her needs before my own, flashed before my eyes like a brutal montage. This wasn't just a party, it was the stage for her final crushing act of dominance. My voice, usually as soft and comforting as a warm blanket, emerged as a low growl, barely audible above the polite chatter. "Clara," I said, my name for her tasting like ash on my tongue, "you talk about love as if it's a prize to be won, a status symbol. You speak of children as the only measure of a woman's heart." My words, though quiet, cut through the air, silencing the laughter, turning heads. The room suddenly held its breath, sensing the shift from light-hearted banter to something far more volatile. Clara's smile wavered, a flicker of surprise, then irritation crossing her perfect features. She hadn't expected me to speak, to challenge her carefully constructed illusion. "Evelyn, darling," she simpered, a condescending tone now replacing her sweetness. "Don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. You're always so dramatic." Her dismissive wave of the hand, meant to brush me away like an annoying fly, was the match that lit the fuse. My breath hitched, a gasp not of pain, but of pure unadulterated fury finally breaking free. "A joke," I echoed, my voice rising, losing its tremor, gaining strength. "You call publicly shaming your own sister a joke? You call years of manipulation, of turning my own family against me, a joke?" The words exploded from me, shattering the fragile peace of the room. Head snapped towards me, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. This wasn't the quiet Evelyn they knew. This was someone else entirely, a woman pushed to her absolute limit. The true story of resilience was about to unfold, not in whispers but in a roar. Clara's face hardened, her cheeks flushing crimson. "What are you talking about?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous, suddenly devoid of its public charm. "You're making a scene, Evelyn. This is my shower." She looked around, seeking validation, seeking rescue from the uncomfortable spotlight that had suddenly turned on her. But the air was thick with tension, the sweetness replaced by the acrid scent of rising animosity. This wasn't just a relationship story anymore. It was a confrontation, raw and unfiltered. A scene. I practically spat the word, rising slowly from my chair, my trembling replaced by a fierce resolve. "You want a scene, Clara? Then let's have a scene. Let's talk about the years you've spent chipping away at my life, my dignity, my finances." My voice gained volume, each word a hammer blow against her carefully constructed facade. A few women gasped, their hands flying to their mouths, as the polite chatter evaporated entirely. This was no longer a gentle family gathering, it was a showdown. Clara's eyes narrowed, a cold, calculating anger replacing her earlier fluster. "You're delusional, Evelyn. You've always been jealous, always bitter. Go home. You're ruining everything." Her voice, though still hushed, was laced with venom, exposing the cruelty that lurked beneath her charming exterior. This was the real Clara, the one who thrived on cheating, revenge, and quiet deceit, the one who always had to win no matter the cost. Ruining everything? I scoffed, taking a step forward, my gaze locked on hers. You ruined everything when you decided my life was a joke, when you decided my very existence was something to be mocked. You think I don't know about the money, Clara? The inheritance you systematically bled dry? The property you tried to steal? The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. The room erupted in gasps, the whispers now loud and incredulous. This was no longer just a familial spat. It was an expose, a revelation of dark family secrets. Clara paled, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape, for someone to intervene. But no one moved. They were all captivated, glued to the unfolding drama, watching a woman finally fight back after years of silent suffering. "You're crazy," she shrieked, her carefully composed demeanor finally cracking. "You're making this up. You're just a bitter old woman who knows nothing about life or love." Her words, meant to wound, only fueled my fire. This was no longer about hurt, it was about justice. "Oh, I know about life, Clara," I stated, my voice resonating with newfound power. "I know about true love, the kind you wouldn't understand. The love that fights for its dignity. The love that refuses to be silenced." I looked around the room, meeting the shocked gazes of the women who had laughed at me just moments before. This isn't just my story, ladies. This is a real-life story of what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. When you mistake kindness for weakness. The atmosphere crackled, thick with unspoken questions and growing awe. They were seeing a transformation. A grandmother takes revenge story unfolding before their very eyes. This was not the end of the scene. It was merely the ferocious, explosive beginning. If you want to hear how this quiet grandmother turned the tables, how I ensured her wedding ended mid-vow, you need to subscribe. This is just the start of a deep, emotionally raw, and ultimately triumphant journey. You don't want to miss a single moment of this sweet revenge short story. That explosive confrontation at Clara's bridal shower wasn't born out of thin air. You know, it had been brewing for decades. A slow burn under the surface of what seemed like a perfectly normal family. To understand the fire that finally erupted, you have to go back to when Clara and I were just girls. We were inseparable then, two sisters against the world. I was the older one, Evelyn always the sensible one, the quiet rock. Clara, she was the sparkle, the sunshine. The one who drew everyone in with her effortless charm and dazzling smile. Mama, God bless her soul, always said I had an old spirit. A quiet strength that Clara, with all her vivacity, sometimes lacked. I was the one who made sure things got done, the bills paid, the fridge stocked, even if it meant my own plate was a little emptier. Clara, on the other hand, always wanted the grand gestures, the easy path, the spotlight. And I, in my quiet way, let her have it. I truly believed that was my role, my purpose. When Mama fell ill, it was my hands that tirelessly nursed her through the long, painful nights. My voice was the one that whispered comfort, that read her favorite scriptures when she was too weak to hold the Bible herself. Clara, bless her heart, she'd visit, always with a tearful hug and promises to do more. But it was me who truly lived those harrowing days and nights by Mama's bedside. It was me who bathed her, fed her, and held her hand as she took her last breath. And it was me who handled the small inheritance Mama left, making sure Clara got her fair share. Even though I knew deep down Mama had intended for most of it to come to me, knowing I'd be the responsible one, the one who would protect it. But I always put family first, always believed in fairness, even if it meant sacrificing my own well-being. I lived by the philosophy that true love meant sacrifice, meant placing the needs of others above your own. And I sacrificed a lot, more than anyone will ever know. My own dreams of college, of starting my own family, of a different kind of life, they all took a back seat. They faded into the background as Clara's needs, her desires, and our family obligations took center stage. I worked tirelessly, often juggling 2 or 3 jobs, just to keep our small family afloat, to ensure Clara had the pretty clothes she yearned for, the opportunities she craved, the lifestyle she felt entitled to. She'd always praise me, of course, telling me how strong I was, how she admired my selflessness. But there was always a glint in her eye, a hint of something unsaid, a quiet understanding that my sacrifice was simply her gain, a tool for her advancement. It wasn't until much later that I truly understood the depth of that transactional dynamic. I remember one particularly rough patch in Clara's life, when she was going through a painful breakup. She crashed at my tiny apartment for months. I cooked her favorite meals, listened to her cry for hours on end, and let her borrow money she never once mentioned repaying. She swore I was her guardian angel, her rock, her everything. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I saw her vulnerability, her raw pain, and I wrapped it in my own strength, hoping to truly heal her broken heart. But even then there were small, fleeting moments, subtle comments that pricked at my heart, tiny thorns in the bouquet of her gratitude. Like the time she casually remarked how lucky I was not to have the burden of children, how free I was to just focus on myself. It wasn't said with outright malice, not overtly, but it felt like a cold dismissal of a deep, unfulfilled longing, a wound she either couldn't see or simply chose to ignore. I shook it off, of course. Always the understanding sister. But that comment, it was a tiny crack in the foundation of my unwavering trust, a flashing warning sign I chose, foolishly, to overlook. I told myself it was just Clara being Clara, flighty and thoughtless, but never truly cruel. Oh, how wrong I was. How utterly, devastatingly wrong. The subtle shifts started becoming more noticeable after Mama passed. Clara was always there, sweet and smiling, offering to help me manage Mama's affairs. She introduced me to her friend, a lawyer named Mr. Henderson, who was so charming, so reassuring. He promised to handle all the paperwork to make sure everything was in perfect order. And I, grieving and vulnerable, trusted him. I signed documents quickly without truly reading them because he made it all seem so simple, so routine. He talked about easier management for Mama's small property and my savings, moving things into joint accounts. I thought he was being helpful. I thought he was protecting my interests. He was family. He was part of the plan. Looking back, the pieces of the puzzle click into place with agonizing clarity. The subtle push for me to sell my small car, because I didn't really need it. The insistence that I didn't need a larger home because it's just you, Evelyn. The constant suggestions that I invest my small inheritance in Clara's brilliant business ventures, always with promises of great returns that never materialized. It wasn't random acts of thoughtlessness. It was a calculated, slow erosion of my financial security, my independence, my very foothold in the world. I had been so busy being the strong one, the supportive one, the selfless sister, that I hadn't seen the quiet theft unfolding right under my nose. I had been so focused on loving them that I hadn't noticed them bleeding me dry, leaving me hollowed out and vulnerable. The true nature of their deception was far darker than I could have ever imagined. The deeper I looked, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of betrayal so intricate it made my stomach churn. It wasn't just Clara, you see. Oh no, Clara was the charming face, the dazzling distraction, the one who kept my eyes fixed on her drama. But there were others circling like vultures, silently picking at the scraps of my life, even as I worked tirelessly to hold everything together. My own cousin, Robert, who I had practically raised, who I had helped start his construction business years ago, had subtly manipulated me into signing away my share of Mama's small property. He told me it was for tax purposes, a temporary measure, just to protect my interests. I trusted him. He was family. He was supposed to be on my side, a silent ally. But he wasn't. He was a silent enemy. Then there was the community. The whispers had started subtly, like a soft breeze, barely noticeable at first. But they grew, becoming a harsh wind that carried rumors about my loneliness, my eccentricity, my supposed lack of understanding of what true family really meant. It was Clara, always Clara, planting those poisonous seeds with her sympathetic sighs and feigned concern. Poor Evelyn, she'd say, her voice dripping with pity. She's just a bit set in her ways. She doesn't really understand how families work, how they stick together. And people believed her because Clara was so charming, so seemingly genuine, so full of warmth and light. My own friends, women I'd shared prayer circles and potlucks with for years, started to look at me differently. They weren't overtly hostile, not at first, but there was a distance, a pity in their eyes that felt like a slap, a cold dismissal. They were watching, judging, listening to Clara's twisted version of our real-life stories. I remember the lawyer Clara introduced me to after Mama passed, Mr. Henderson. He was so kind, so reassuring. He handled all the paperwork, he said, made sure everything was in perfect order. But looking back, there were documents I signed quickly without fully reading them, because he made it seem so simple, so routine, so trustworthy. I was grieving, vulnerable, my heart aching for Mama. He had been a wolf in sheep's clothing, a crucial part of Clara's elaborate scheme. He ensured that the property deeds were quietly shifted, that my small savings were put into joint accounts for easier management, accounts that only Clara seemed to have full, unrestricted access to. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have ever imagined, a sprawling family revenge story that was slowly consuming me. The realization hit me in waves, each one colder than the last, like icy water drenching my soul. The subtle pushing for me to sell my small car, the constant insistence that I didn't need a larger home, the way they convinced me to invest in Clara's failing business venture. Always with promises of great returns, always with that sweet, deceptive smile from my sister. It wasn't just random acts of thoughtlessness or neglect. It was a calculated, slow, agonizing erosion of my financial security, my independence, my very foothold in the world. They wanted me to be dependent, to be helpless, to be nothing. I had been so busy being the strong one, the supportive one, the selfless one, that I hadn't seen the quiet theft, the insidious infidelity stories of trust unfolding right under my nose. I had been so focused on loving them, on protecting them, that I hadn't noticed them bleeding me dry, leaving me with nothing but air. The dread grew, a cold knot tightening in my stomach with each new discovery. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me to disappear, to have nothing left. The gentle grandmother, the quiet pillar of the family, was being systematically dismantled, erased from her own life. And then the final gut-wrenching piece of the puzzle fell into place. I stumbled upon a faded, barely legible will from Mama that had been lost for years, hidden away in an old photo album. This will clearly stated that Mama had left me almost everything. Recognizing my tireless dedication, my sacrifices. This wasn't some minor oversight. This was outright theft, a deliberate concealment. I stared at that faded paper, my hands shaking, the words blurring through unshed tears. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about my Mama's wishes being ignored, twisted, and violated. It was about my entire life being manipulated, turned into a tragic audio story of quiet suffering. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just taken my things. They had tried to take my very identity, my legacy, my worth. The silence, the polite endurance, the turning of the other cheek. It was all over. A fierce, righteous anger, colder and harder than any I had ever known, settled deep within me. I was done staying silent. I was done being the joke. I was done being the easy mark. A new chapter of this true story with a twist was about to begin. And it wasn't going to be quiet. The world as I knew it didn't just shatter. It exploded into a million tiny jagged pieces, each one piercing me deeper than the last. The official legal papers arrived, not in a gentle envelope, but in a thick, menacing packet delivered by a stern-faced man who avoided my gaze. They confirmed what I had slowly, agonizingly pieced together in the dark, sleepless hours of the night. The property, Mama's land, was gone, legally signed away under false pretenses. My small savings, the nest egg I had meticulously built over decades of hard work and sacrifice, were depleted, vanished into thin air. And the inheritance Mama had so carefully left for me, the one Clara had sworn was safe, had simply evaporated, leaving me with nothing but air and a crushing weight of betrayal. It felt heavier than any physical burden, a suffocating blanket woven from deceit and broken trust. I was left with nothing but the clothes on my back, the fading memories of a life I thought I had, and a raw, gaping wound in my soul. My small apartment, the only solace I had left, the last bastion of my independence, suddenly felt like a cold, lonely box, its walls closing in on me. There were days I couldn't even force myself to get out of bed. The pain in my chest so acute it felt like a physical wound, a constant throbbing ache of loss and humiliation. The shame was a relentless tide washing over me, drowning me in regret and disbelief. How could I have been so blind? So utterly, profoundly foolish? I, Evelyn, the sensible one, the strong one, had been played for a fool, a pawn in their cruel game. I questioned everything then. My worth, my judgment, my very understanding of what it meant to love and be loved within a family. Had I always been so naive, so easily manipulated, so utterly trusting? The tears came in torrents, not quiet sobs, but guttural cries that shook my entire being, rattling the very foundations of my composure. I felt like a hollowed-out husk, discarded, used up, thrown away. Homelessness, a terrifying specter I had never imagined would haunt my doorstep, loomed large as I stared at the harsh, unforgiving lines of the eviction notice, its words mocking my desperation, mocking my quiet life. Friends, the very women who had offered comforting words and sympathetic smiles at Clara's shower, now avoided my gaze in the grocery store, turning their heads, pretending not to see me. Their silence, heavy and deafening, was a testament to the malicious rumors Clara had so skillfully spread. She had painted me as unstable, as bitter, as someone who was making things up. I was truly alone, adrift in a sea of my own despair, the victim of a calculated, cruel campaign of isolation. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant companion in my now empty days. One evening, as the last weary rays of sun slipped below the horizon, painting my empty room in shades of melancholic orange and bruised purple, I stumbled upon something tucked away in a dusty box in the back of my closet. It was an old, worn journal, its cover soft with age. It was Mama's. Her elegant, familiar script filled the pages, chronicling her own struggles, her quiet acts of defiance, her unwavering belief in justice and truth. She had written about overcoming adversity, about standing tall even when the world tried to push her down, about finding strength in the deepest valleys of despair. Her words, full of quiet wisdom and a fierce spirit I had almost forgotten, were a balm to my raw, bleeding soul. Evelyn, she had written on the very last page, her handwriting a little shaky, your strength is not in how much you can bear, but in knowing when to fight back. Sometimes, darling, the biggest love you can give yourself is to stand up for your truth. As I traced her words with a trembling finger, a faint knock echoed through my silent apartment. It was Mrs. Jenkins, my elderly neighbor from across the hall, her eyes filled with a quiet compassion that spoke volumes, saying more than any words could. She didn't offer pity, just a warm bowl of her famous chicken stew and a simple heartfelt, "You're not alone, Evelyn. Some of us we see." Her kindness, a small, unexpected act of grace in a world that felt devoid of it, was a spark in the overwhelming darkness. It was a whisper of hope, a powerful reminder that not everyone had been swayed by Clara's manipulative charm, that some still saw the real me. As I held Mama's worn journal, its familiar cover a tangible link to her unwavering spirit, and tasted the warm, nourishing stew, a tiny flicker ignited within me. This wasn't the end. This was the turning point. This wasn't where I crumbled forever into dust. This was where I began to rebuild slowly, painfully, but with a fierce new purpose. The breaking point was not a final defeat, but a brutal, necessary awakening. It was the moment I realized that even from ashes, something stronger, more resilient can rise. The tears still flowed, but now they were tears of clarity, of resolve. I had been brought to my knees, but I would not stay there. Not anymore. If you've ever had to rebuild from ashes, if you've known the deep ache of betrayal, if you've been knocked down but refused to stay down, stick with me. This is where the real fight begins, where the journey for redemption truly starts. You're not alone in this kind of survival story. The true mastermind behind my suffering wasn't who I thought. For so long I had seen Clara as the sole perpetrator, the one pulling all the strings, the architect of my downfall. I genuinely believed her cruelty stemmed from a simple, selfish desire for money and status, a desperate need to outshine me. But then a quiet conversation, a chance discovery by my grandniece, Maya, changed absolutely everything. Maya, a brilliant, observant young woman who always had a knack for seeing past the shiny surface of things, had been sorting through old family documents for a school project. It was a tedious task, full of faded photographs and yellowed letters, but her meticulous nature paid off in a way none of us could have foreseen. She found it. A series of cryptic emails and dusty, handwritten letters exchanged between Clara and Uncle Silas, my father's older brother. Uncle Silas. The name itself felt like a ghost from the past. He had always been the quiet one, the seemingly harmless, distant relative who showed up at family gatherings with a forced, almost uncomfortable smile, and left just as quickly. I had always pitied him, thinking he was a bit of a recluse, perhaps even a victim of his own quiet, unassuming nature. I saw him as a lonely figure, someone who had missed out on life. But these letters, found tucked away in an old hatbox in the attic, told a chillingly different story. They revealed a deeply resentful man, simmering with bitterness over a perceived slight from my father decades ago. A long-forgotten land dispute he believed he was cheated out of. He had been quietly manipulating Clara for years, feeding her ambition, preying on her insecurities, twisting her shallow desires into his own insidious weapon. Clara, with all her charm and superficiality, wasn't the master. She was just a puppet. Uncle Silas was the true puppeteer, pulling the strings from the shadows, meticulously planning my financial ruin as a twisted, delayed form of revenge against my father's memory, played out through me. It was a cold, calculated dark family secret finally brought to light. Maya also unearthed something even more damning. A hidden will, an even older one than the faded copy I had found, tucked away in a dusty old Bible that had belonged to my grandfather. This original will clearly stipulated that the majority of the family land, the very land Uncle Silas had coveted for decades, was to pass directly to me, Evelyn, as the eldest grandchild and the one most dedicated to preserving the family legacy. It had been intentionally hidden, replaced by the manipulated, falsified version that left me with absolutely nothing. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity, illuminating a picture of deep, generations-old resentment that had simmered into a full-blown conspiracy. It wasn't just about Clara's greed. It was about Uncle Silas's decades-long vendetta, a quiet, simmering hatred that had finally boiled over, using my sister as his unwitting tool. The revelation didn't ignite a fiery rage within me, not in the way the initial betrayal had. Instead, it brought a strange, almost unsettling sense of clarity, a cold, hard resolve. My fight was no longer just about personal vindication against Clara. It was about exposing a deeper, darker truth, about reclaiming a legacy that had been stolen not just from me, but from generations of my family. It was about honoring Mama and Grandpa's true wishes. My unexpected ally Maya, with her sharp mind, her unwavering belief in justice, and her quiet determination, became my silent partner, my confidant. We began to meticulously gather evidence, to trace the money, to expose the intricate paper trail of deception that Uncle Silas and Clara had woven. We worked tirelessly, often late into the night, piecing together documents, scanning old letters, cross-referencing dates, and making detailed notes. This wasn't just emotional intuition anymore. This was concrete, irrefutable proof. I was no longer the trembling victim, caught in a web of deceit. I was a strategist, a quiet force of nature preparing for a reckoning that would shake my family to its very core, exposing the deep-seated betrayal stories that had haunted us for so long. The time for tears was over. The time for justice, for truth, had arrived. I was no longer the target, I was the hunter. There was a moment, clear as day, when I looked at Maya surrounded by stacks of files and the glow of her laptop screen, and I knew. The shift was complete. I felt a power deep within me that had been dormant for too long. A power born not of anger, but of clarity and unwavering purpose. Clara and Uncle Silas thought they had won, that they had successfully erased me. They thought I was broken beyond repair. But they had profoundly underestimated the quiet resilience of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. This was my grandma revenge story, and I was no longer just a character in it, I was writing the ending. I was no longer the victim, I was the architect of my own justice, and the blueprint was clear. The game had changed and they had no idea just how decisively. The first step was a quiet one, almost imperceptible to the outside world, but to me it felt like the very earth shifting beneath my feet, trembling with the weight of my newfound purpose. With Maya's relentless research and the expert guidance of a compassionate lawyer, a sharp woman recommended by Mrs. Jenkins's savvy grandson, we finally began to challenge the fraudulent property transfers. That initial court hearing wasn't a thunderclap, but a steady, persistent drumbeat of truth. It was a small victory, yes, but a powerful one. A clear sign that the tide was turning. The judge, a stoic woman with a mind like a steel trap, saw right through the convoluted legal maneuvering that Uncle Silas and Clara's slimy lawyer, Mr. Henderson, had so carefully orchestrated. She didn't hesitate. A freeze was immediately put on the sale of the ancestral land, stopping their final grab cold. The fear in Clara's eyes, even across the sterile, hushed courtroom, was a delicious, unexpected balm to my soul. Her usual facade of effortless charm, that sugary mask she wore for the world, faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine unadulterated panic. The first crack in her armor, a sign that my revenge was just beginning. Next, we focused on the financial manipulation, the systematic draining of my accounts. With Maya's unwavering help, her brilliant mind cutting through years of tangled deceit, we meticulously documented every unauthorized transaction, every single penny stolen from those joint accounts Clara had so confidently controlled. We gathered bank statements, withdrawal slips, and even hidden receipts that showed her frivolous spending. The bank, initially resistant, putting up a wall of corporate indifference, couldn't ignore the mountain of irrefutable evidence we presented. It wasn't a criminal charge yet, not in that moment, but the bank initiated a swift internal investigation, and Clara's accounts were flagged, frozen, investigated. Her access, her supposed control, vanished. The community, always quick to gossip, to sniff out a scandal, began to shift their whispers. No longer was it poor Evelyn, but a growing incredulous buzz of "Did you hear about Clara? What's going on with her money?" The public shame, a cruel weapon Clara had so gleefully wielded against me, was now turned squarely on her, a bitter, agonizing taste in her own mouth. And I didn't stop there. I started a small online platform, a blog initially just for myself, a quiet place to process my pain and find my voice. But it grew organically, unexpectedly. I wrote about resilience, about quiet strength, about the insidious nature of betrayal stories, and about finding the courage to overcome deep-seated family deceit. I never named names, never pointed fingers directly, but my story, raw and honest, resonated with so many. It became a quiet movement, a source of empowerment for others who had suffered in silence, a subtle yet powerful act of social revenge. People started to see me not as the pitiable, childless woman, the one to be pitied and dismissed, but as a survivor, a powerful voice for those who had been silenced, for all the unheard narratives hiding in the shadows. Clara, who thrived on public adoration, on being the belle of every ball, found herself slowly but surely losing her audience. Her social media posts, once filled with glowing comments and effusive praise, started to gather sarcastic remarks, questioning glances, cold, skeptical silence. Her carefully curated image was crumbling, pixel by painful pixel. The culmination of this initial wave of justice, this first strong blow, came when Robert, my cousin, contacted me. He was distraught, panicked, his voice a frantic whisper on the phone. The freeze on the ancestral property had halted his own plans for a lucrative development, a major deal he had already sunk considerable money into. He saw his business, his entire future, crumbling before his eyes, a direct consequence of his greed and his complicity in Uncle Silas and Clara's schemes. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was desperate. He offered to cooperate, to provide concrete evidence against Uncle Silas and Clara, if I would only spare him, if I would only lift the freeze. He was a worm, yes, a spineless opportunist, but he was a useful one. His fear was palpable, a stark contrast to his earlier smugness, his condescending attitude. He had always dismissed me as harmless, as a quiet, predictable fixture in the background. Now, he saw the storm I had become, the unyielding force he had so foolishly underestimated. The realization that I was no longer the quiet, easily manipulated Evelyn, but a woman capable of orchestrating a powerful family revenge story, had finally, terrifyingly, sunk in. He was starting to truly fear the quiet woman he had dismissed as a joke, and that, my friend, was just the beginning. The final confrontation wasn't in a sterile courtroom, though the legal battles continued to simmer like a pot left too long on the stove. No, this showdown happened at the family reunion, a place where all our lives intersected, where the facade of unity was always so carefully, so desperately maintained. Clara's wedding had been postponed, you see, a direct casualty of the mounting legal pressure, and the whispers that now followed her everywhere. This gathering was her desperate attempt to regain some semblance of normalcy, to mend her shattered public image. She wore a forced smile, a brittle thing that didn't reach her eyes, her usual charm now a thin, transparent veneer over her simmering panic. Uncle Silas, always lurking in the background, looked less like a harmless recluse and more like a cornered rat, his eyes darting nervously around the room, sensing the trap closing in. I arrived quietly, not with a grand entrance or a dramatic flourish, but with a palpable presence that drew every eye in the room. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I was there to reveal the truth, to lift the veil on years of deceit. My voice when I began to speak was calm, steady, and amplified by a small, discreet microphone Maya had insisted I use, the kind of gadget that signals seriousness. I started by simply thanking everyone for coming, for being family. Then I began to speak of Mama, of her quiet wisdom, of her true wishes, and of the hidden will Maya had so bravely found. I didn't shout. I simply spoke, each word weighted with undeniable truth. Then the real-life story started to unravel. On a large screen set up for a seemingly innocent family slideshow, I projected images of the fraudulent transfers, the false signatures, the manipulated documents. My voice remained steady, clear, almost detached, as I explained each piece of the puzzle. Then came the true gut punch. Secret recordings of Uncle Silas's chilling instructions to Clara, meticulously gathered by Robert, who, in his fear, had become an unexpected, reluctant ally. His desperate plea for leniency had given me the final, crushing pieces of evidence. The calm, manipulative voice of Uncle Silas filled the room, detailing how to drain my accounts, how to hide the property deeds, how to isolate me. The air in the room grew thick with disbelief, then outright outrage. Murmurs turned into gasps, then angry shouts as the full, ugly truth unfolded before their very eyes. The stolen inheritance, the deliberate financial ruin, the years of manipulation and public shaming, all orchestrated by Uncle Silas and shamelessly carried out by Clara. Clara's face contorted, her carefully constructed mask shattering into a million pieces. She tried to interrupt, to deny, to shriek, but her words were drowned out by the undeniable evidence, by the collective gasp of betrayal from those who had once admired her, who had believed her love stories. Uncle Silas, seeing his carefully built house of cards collapse, tried to slip away, to melt into the crowd, but he was blocked by several family members, his quiet cruelty now exposed for all to see. There was no escape. I ended not with a condemnation, not with a bitter, triumphant shout, but with a statement of reclaiming my dignity, my very essence. My sister, I said, my voice clear and unwavering, once told me I could never understand love without having children. She made me a joke, a symbol of what she thought was lacking in my life. But what she never expected was the love that blossomed from within me. The love for truth, for justice, for myself. The survival story that was truly mine. I showed them the true, original will, Mama's wishes made clear. The family land rightfully, legally, undeniably mine. I didn't gloat, I didn't yell, I didn't savor her humiliation in the way she had savored mine. I simply presented the truth, unvarnished and undeniable. The weak woman, the quiet one, the one they had all dismissed, now held all the power in that room. Clara crumpled, sinking into a nearby chair, tears streaming down her face, not of remorse I knew but of utter crushing defeat. Uncle Silas stood exposed, his grand scheme in ruins, his bitterness finally revealed for the poison it was. I had given her a gift, a painful gift of truth, and it ended not just her postponed wedding plans, but her entire reign of deception. I looked at Clara, not with hatred, but with a quiet understanding of her hollow existence, her desperate need for external validation. Then I turned and walked away, not running, not celebrating with triumphant cheers, but simply walking, lighter than I had been in years, finally truly free. The karma stories had come full circle. Years have passed since that day at the family reunion, since the raw truths were laid bare and the echoes of my voice, firm with purpose, finally filled the void left by years of deceit. My life, once seemingly shattered beyond repair, has been rebuilt, brick by painful brick, into something stronger, something more authentic than I ever imagined. The ancestral land, once almost lost to greed, is now a thriving community garden, a place of peace, growth, and vibrant life. I chose not to profit from it in the way Uncle Silas and Robert had planned, turning it into a soulless development. Instead, I chose to share it, to nurture it, to make it a place where real community could flourish, where children could learn about nature, and elders could find solace. It became a living symbol of renewal, a tangible testament to reclaiming what was rightfully ours, not just materially but spiritually. Clara, stripped of her charm, her public adoration, and the spotlight she craved, faced her own bitter reckoning. The legal battles continued for a while, dragging on, but ultimately, with the irrefutable evidence against her and Uncle Silas, They both faced the very real consequences of their actions. Uncle Silas, due to his advanced age and declining health, avoided jail time, but his reputation was utterly destroyed. He lived out his remaining days in bitter isolation, a prisoner of his own resentment and the community's quiet condemnation. Clara, humbled and exposed, eventually found a quieter path, far from the grand stages she once sought. She sent me a letter once, not a full apology, no, but a hesitant acknowledgement of her mistakes, a grudging admission of the emptiness of her relentless pursuit of status and external validation. I don't know if she ever truly found peace or redemption, but I know she learned the hard way that charm alone cannot build a life, and that the truth always finds a way to surface. Robert, the cousin who had so easily betrayed me for a quick profit, tried desperately to make amends. He tried to offer help to reconnect, but trust, once shattered into so many pieces, is a difficult thing to repair. I offered him forgiveness because holding on to bitterness only poisons your own soul, but I did not offer a return to our old dynamic. He found his own way, building a smaller, more ethical business, perhaps learning finally from the devastating consequences of his own greedy actions. Maya, my brilliant grandniece, went on to become a successful lawyer, dedicating her life to fighting for those who are underestimated and unheard, just like I had been. Mrs. Jenkins, my kind neighbor, lived to see the community garden flourish, her quiet compassion a constant, beautiful reminder that true allies often appear in the most unassuming forms, shining a light when you need it most. My journey, this long, arduous survival story, taught me the deepest, most profound lessons about life. It taught me that survival isn't just about enduring hardship, about simply getting through each day. It's about choosing your worth fiercely and unapologetically, every single day, especially when others try to strip it from you. It's about understanding that love isn't just about having children, or a partner, or a certain kind of picture-perfect life. It's about the fierce, unyielding love you cultivate for yourself, the unwavering belief in your own truth, even when others try to diminish you, to make you a joke. It's about finding your voice, even if it's a quiet one at first, and using it to reclaim your dignity, to redefine what it truly means to be powerful. I am still Evelyn, the grandmother, the quiet one, but I am also a force, a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. My peace was hard-won, forged in the fires of betrayal and pain, but it is real, and it is entirely wonderfully mine. This isn't just my story. It's a true story for anyone who has ever been underestimated, who has ever had to fight to reclaim their peace and their place in the world. It's a motivational tale for every single soul who's been knocked down, but found the strength to rise again. If you're a survivor, if you've had to fight for your peace, if you've learned that your story matters, then your journey deserves to be seen and heard. Subscribe now. Your voice matters too. Let's keep sharing our truths, one powerful, inspiring story at a time.